Mm, 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 mm,
Going on. We are back like promised. We're keeping our word. We're keeping our word.
as
So
always.
tonight we are going to get into some stuff as we always do. We have a theory of why people continue to think that this old book is outdated. The Bible's doctrine may be older, it's very traditional, but at the end of the day, it still is very, very, very relevant to everyday life in today's society. And I think the best way to dissect that is to go point by point to figure out how we can find relative points in the Bible that relate to things that we struggle in everyday life. And I think we'll actually find that everything that we struggle with, every question we have, every insight that we all share as human beings is within the Bible and there's an answer for it. So I think that's
Mm,
the really interesting thing about it.
yep. Yep.
It's
And go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's interesting to talk about the atheists specifically because I think that they delve deeply into biblical context to disprove, and then they're also very related to science and wanting to, use science to disprove the Bible. So we can even start from like a simple concept, which is not so simple anymore because the flat earthers have resurfaced and they are very adamant about their stance that the earth is flat. But even simple things like that, the Bible has such scientific foresight that we find that the Bible is not contradictory to science at all. God actually created science for us to discover, for us to explore, for us to create. And I think that when we try to put anything in contrast to God, we're going to see that thing fail every single time. And so in Isaiah, it describes the earth as flat. I mean, I'm sorry. It describes the earth as
Rush
sphere.
that real quick.
Yeah, 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 yeah. They could be. I thought it was
Yeah.
the okay. Isaiah 40 and 22, we're looking at the earth being circle. And in Job 26:7, the earth hangs on nothing, aligning with gravity and space. So I think that a lot of these arguments often stem from trying to disprove the Bible and not actually with the intention of figuring out how the Bible is applicable.
Yeah. And I think where we got to start with the beginning is like the question of authority, right? Because what they say is the Bible has no authority, the Bible has no relevancy in today's modern time. That's a
Mhm.
2,000 year old, 3,000 year old, 4,000 year old doctrine that has no relevance in 2025. But
Right.
we have to ask ourselves the question of what is authority, right? The question of authority is what defines truth, morality, and purpose. It's essential, and it's a central documentation of every worldview. Every single worldview around the whole entire world has to ask themselves this question. I don't care if you're a believer or a non-believer, you have to ask yourself this question. Even if the people at the bottom don't ask this question, the people at the top who have to take care of the people at the bottom have to ask this question. So no matter what, you can't avoid truth, morality, and purpose. Throughout history, we've seen that countless ideologies have risen and fallen, but one text, one book has stood the test of time, and it has endured the test of time. It shaped civilizations. It's continued to, transform lives. The Bible itself is something that stands firm, and it's resolved, and it shows consistency, and it shows endurance, which is something you need when you're trying to figure out if something is true, right?
Mhm.
For something to be true, you have to see, does it have endurance, and is it consistent? And we find that the Bible is both of these things at once. It's always consistent in its message. So that's your first truth. Your second
Right.
truth is, can it be tested within time? And as we see, we're here in 2025. The Bible is older than everybody listening to this thing combined, So we have seen that the Bible is consistent and has endurance because it has stood the test of time. And there's everyone is still questioning till this day, is it true? Is it not true? Did Jesus really rise? Did he not really rise? So this gives you positive evidence that the Bible is still relevant, because for something to be true, it has to endure. It has to go through something. It has to be tested. It has to be punched. It has to be kicked down. It has to be thrown out. It has to be praised. It has to not be praised. It has to go through all these things. And if it never changes, this is how you know it's true. So we know that the Bible has relevancy, and it's true, and it's consistent, and it endures because of everything it's been through, and it's still here today, and people are arguing over it in 2025.
Hmm. And a quick little insight about me. For some reason, I'm pretty sure it's because I went to college. That old people monotone voice, that dry, like classroom, you about to fall asleep. That's how I learned. That's an
Yeah.
effective way for
When
me to
you're
learn.
talking to somebody, when they sound like a narrator, you're like, yeah, they
Yeah, when
smart.
it
They sound like a
sounds
narrator.
just old as dirt, just
Yeah.
wise, just like,
They sound like
oh
a
God.
narrator. You know that they
They
smart.
can't barely get them words out. They
Yep.
speaking at the pace of molasses. So what I'm saying is, one of the main sources that I found, like, a lot of people indulge in self-help, and they indulge in
Yeah.
like all of these motivational speeches and how to better their lives and things of that sort. And one of the people that I found to be most influential, one of the people that I listen to daily for years now, and this is prior to me really delving into the Bible and understanding God's purpose for my life, was
Mm.
Earl Nightingale.
Yeah.
And when I tell y'all, I can quote Earl Nightingale so well, because every morning on a consistent basis, I'm listening to him and Napoleon Hill and all of these older, motivation and inspirational speakers, because at the time they were the authority, and they were the
Yeah.
people who had the authority in those time periods where people looked and say, "How did you accomplish this? How did you do that?" Like Think and Grow Rich was like it's still one of the biggest selling books
In
in
the
the
world.
world.
Yeah.
And I say that because once I started to read my Bible and understand God's context for life, and the content within it, and what he says, and what his character is, and what he means, I found that Earl is reciting the Bible. Napoleon is
Exactly.
reciting the Bible. These
Exactly.
people, the smartest people, are reciting the Bible, and they're putting it in modern terms for us to
Hmm.
feel like that's trendy or that's this, because a lot of people don't want to listen to Les Brown old tapes of him talking about his life. Nobody wants to listen to those old narrated tapes because they seem boring, other than
Or
me,
let's
right?
let's let's just be honest. A lot of people now in modern ages, they say that it's irrelevant because they don't want to actually open up their book, because they're like, sitting there for 2 hours reading the Bible is boring, right? So
Right.
they'll go read a Earl Nightingale, they'll go read a Napoleon Hill and listen to it and be like, oh, see, Napoleon Hill, Earl Nightingale is smart. But all they're doing is just taking references, taking verses, taking the ideologies, taking the references from the Bible, and then putting it into the book. And you're like, they're smart. I mean, yes, it's not that they're not smart, but the ideas that they got is not from themselves. Earl Nightingale didn't get these ideas from himself. He got these ideas from the Bible that you say is irrelevant. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And
So these
and
people are smart, but they're not smarter than the test of time of the Bible.
Right, and that's the interesting point. You drove my point right down. Like, it's very interesting to see who we hold in authoritative positions, and see who
Hmm.
we'll listen to, and see who we find inspiration within. And then when you listen to Napoleon, or when you listen to Earl, you hear them speak about God very often. And
Often, yeah.
that's them giving you they're alluding to the fact that they've gotten most of their concepts and theology from the Bible. And then
Exactly.
also you can do background work to see all of, like, from Henry Ford to, of course, I can't even think of his name. Henry Ford to Rockefeller to
JP Morgan.
Morgan, all of these people, they were pastors. They were in the Catholic churches. They were here. They were there in the sense of their faith. And I think that the reason that they prevailed so far is because they downloaded basically the Bible into their conscious being able to say, this is how you navigate and conquer life. And I think that that's why so many people struggle. So the second point I was going to make is the Bible has such a psychological insight. And so when we all are struggling, right? We're like, when I found Earl Nightingale, I was like struggling with depression and struggling with sadness and struggling with all of these things, not understanding how to conquer my own mind. Because, Earl says you are what you think about. But the beautiful, ironic thing about that is the Bible says in Proverbs, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And it captures this cognitive behavioral truth that centuries have carried on and on. So before psychology, there was the Bible. Before mental health, there was the Bible. Before people were diagnosed with this, and that, and before people were talking about,
Before there
depression,
was counselors and therapists.
there's nothing new under the sun. There was the Bible,
Yeah,
and he already gave you ways to navigate your mental health. And so when you hear these people telling you these gems and you're like, oh my gosh, where did he get that from? How does Earl Nightingale know that you are what you think about and you have to have a certain direction in life or you're just wandering, you're just roaming? Because the Bible says so. That's why.
exactly.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
why it resonates so deeply.
Yeah, and you have to understand that all authority, I don't care what authority you want to look to, all authority has to be grounded in truth. The foundation of authority has to be in truth. If authority is not grounded in truth, it's going to crack, break, and be frail. So, for something to have authority, it has to be grounded in truth. Anything outside of that is just temporary authority or false authority, right? And
Right.
this is the reason how we know the Bible is true, because no matter where you try to look, right, people always have to ask themselves the question of, is this right? Is this wrong? Is this right? Is this wrong? Should I not? I ought to, I ought not to. You always constantly have to ask yourself these questions. And you're not getting these things from just out of thin air where you just woke up and said, I'm smart. I'm so smart. I just thought about, is morality a real thing? No, that's something that's instilled in you. And the Bible has told you this a long time ago. The Bible told you you are made in the image of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which is why God says, let us make them in our image, because you're not coming up with these concepts in your brain out of thin air. They were
Mhm.
instilled into you, and the Bible is letting you know where it's coming from. So you actually aren't lost, and you're just thinking, where did I get this from? He's telling you, hey, I'm giving you a reference on where you got it from. You got it from me. So people don't understand that the value of truth is so important, right? People want to live in this gray area. Let's not even say people. Atheists want to live in this gray area of some of these things are true and then some of these things are not true. You can't have both. Atheists want to look at this over here. If they like something over here that the Bible says is a no-no, they say, well, the Bible's wrong, it's irrelevant, that doesn't matter, right? And you're like, how are you going to throw the Bible out? And then if you say something like, well, what if I came up to you and slapped you, right? Let's say you tell an atheist that, what if I came up to you and punched you in the face? They'd be like, well, that would be wrong. Why is that wrong? Because you
Because I
just
think
think
so.
so. Yes,
Because I
exactly. That's what they're going to say. They're going to say, because I think so. That's not an actual answer. Just because you think or feel, what if I think or feel like harming people? Is that right? No. How do you know? If you're not using the Bible as your authority to say what is right from wrong, how do you know as an atheist that this is wrong? You don't. You're just saying this is just what I think. So that means that the person over here who's next to you, what if they say, well, I think that it's not wrong? Are you going to look at them crazy? You might. So you have to live in some sort of truth. And what I find is atheists can't truly live out atheism. And the reason is because they still have morality. They still have morals because it was instilled into them. So when they try to deny the Bible, they're only denying the Bible because they want to throw out some of the things that the Bible said that they disagree with and keep some of the things that the Bible says that they agree with. So they're trying to live in both worlds. They're like, well, we agree with this, so this is kind of true, but we don't agree with this, so this is not true. So we want to just throw the whole Bible out in the first place. But you have to understand that the Bible is based off of real people and real places, right? This myth of the Bible being inaccurate because it's a myth and it's a fantasy is not true. We have places like Jericho and Sodom. People thought, when they talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, people thought the
Right.
place Sodom was a fake place. They thought this was like Atlantis. And we have found that through actual findings that these places were real.
Right.
So when you're saying the Bible is fake, well then tell me how that these places that they're mentioning in the Bible years and years and years and years and years ago, right? Centuries ago are still here today. And you want to know how you know that it's not man-made? Because a lot of these places that they recited and that they cited in the Bible actually were called something else than we call it today. And we can trace it all the way back. For example, like the Persian Empire, like Iran, all these different places, right? Back then, it wasn't called Iran or Iraq or any of these things, right? Back then, this was the Babylonian Empire.
Right.
So in the
Right.
Bible, it'll be called the Babylonian Empire, and they're automatically people who don't read, they're automatically saying the Babylonian Empire doesn't exist. Well, it doesn't exist anymore, but that doesn't mean that it's not real. If you go actually do your research and look up what was the Babylonian Empire, just do a quick Google search. What was the Babylonian Empire? It's going to make up a lot of those Middle Eastern countries that are still here today. They just divided up into individual countries. But back then, the Babylonian Empire was a very, very large territory. Back then, they didn't have just little small countries, they had territories. So the Bible is not fake. They had things that were in there that are still here today. But back then, they didn't call it, like I said, they didn't call it Iran or Pakistan or any of these things. It was Babylonian Empire, you know?
Right.
So this is how you know that they're not making this stuff up. Because if they were making this stuff up, they'll be calling it what we know it as today. They say, well, the people in power are making these books up. Then why would they not just simply just call it? They would just make up something. People are not as smart as you truly think. And my other point is find me another person in the world, not just in the US, in the world who has the story that Jesus has. I don't care. You go from Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, Gandhi. There is not one person in the world that has a story like Jesus. You know why there's no one in the world that has a story like him? Because you can't make this up. I don't care how smart you think you are. You cannot make this story up. You can't make a story up of a man coming down challenging the authorities and saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. These people are doing it right. These people are sick. I'm going to heal them. These people are this. I'm going to help them. I'm going to get some disciples. I'm going to die for people's sins. I'm going to resurrect. I'm going to get glorified in my body. You can't make this up. There's not a story like it. There's not a story like it. You want to know one of the biggest movies that is in Hollywood? The Matrix. And do you know what The Matrix is made off of? The story of Jesus. The story of Jesus, The Matrix is made up off of.
Right.
There's not a story like Jesus. So for you to say that the Bible is inaccurate, there's not one man who was smart enough to think of a story like Jesus who could say, we're gonna we're gonna bring a man into the world and let him die and claim that he's God and claim that he's this. You don't even find people who claim to be God. You don't even find this. So no one can make this up because there's not someone bold enough. There's people who claim to be prophets. There's people who claim to be rich. There's people who claim to be scammers. There's people who claim to be all types of things. But there is not a man in the world who is bold enough to gain a following and claim to be God. None of them. None of them. You know why you can't make this up? Because no one is going to do that. No one's going to claim to be God and die because they claim to be God. You can't make that up.
Yeah, you can't. And I think that, um, sorry, Malik, you be going, boy. I tell you, I'll be looking. I'll be like, okay, let me, because I missed my point. I missed my point when you be going. But yeah, no, I
I
think
got a lot.
I think that when you're talking about Jesus, when you're talking about his story, when you're talking about the authenticity of it, I think that we see a recycling of the human mind when we look at entertainment, right? When we look
Yeah.
at people speaking about different stories, and we look at fairy tales, and we look at fiction, and we look at superheroes, and we look at all of these things, and we see a common analysis of all of them. There is the
Yeah.
underdog, there's the overcoming with the underdog, and then there's the victory, or there's the failure of the villain or the villain who becomes a superhero, those type of things, right? They're like cliche things.
Yeah.
The thing about Jesus is anybody to come up with this story would at least give the empowerment of like the real embodiment of the supernatural on earth, right? Like I think a human being in essence of who we are, we're very prideful, and so when it comes down to creating a great story, you have God come down to earth, then God is going to be doing like there's miracles. Of course, Jesus did miracles, but I'm talking about like things that were just like, I'm just going to show y'all. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to do this. And we see the humbleness in Jesus. We don't see this flashy guy who's here like how they assumed he would be. He's going to conquer the Roman Empire. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. He's going to do this. You know, we don't see that in him. We see this humble character who is I'm sorry, a humble man in character who is here to with a certain purpose, and there's nothing to distract him from that purpose. And I think that there is no type of ingenuity in the human mind to be able to conceive a concept like that and then go 2000 plus years after and not be able to find major holes to discredit it. Like that's
Exactly.
just we're flawed in our thinking. When you go and you try to find out if something is fiction, you do cross comparison, you do history, you do this, you do that. And before you know it, if somebody takes the time, especially a scholar, to disprove something that is in fact fiction, it wouldn't be long before it's proven. But us still
Exactly.
having this discussion, this debate, and being able to say, I'm a believer and I'm not, and it hasn't been discredited, speaks volumes to the authenticity of the story alone. But then there's also the the Bible also explains the paradox of progress, right?
Mhm.
So we find people getting smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter. But the thing that the Bible highlights is that the endless knowledge of humanity is great, but there's nothing really new under the sun. But the reality of it is we are emptier in our souls than we've ever been. So when we come off as so intelligent and yet we have such a confusion in what we believe in and what we stand for, it's due to the emptiness of our souls. It's due to the fact that we don't have certain character traits and we are flawed in our thinking, and we have a lot of mental issues that we're not able to overcome based on not having the tools to do so. And so we see ourselves in these cycles. You know, we see ourselves in these cycles. And then in Daniel, it says knowledge will increase, but people will run to and fro. You know why? Because over here, and I've said this many times in many streams, I find us to be a noodle back society. We lean it. We lean here and we lean there, and we don't
Yeah.
stand for nothing because
Yeah. Have no spine.
there's nothing in this world that Tashay Carson stands for other than Christ 100% of the time. It's not
Mhm.
possible. We're humans. Our ideology, our programs, our affiliations, our society in general is flawed. And there are going to be flaws in everything that we can account for. But I can say, and I can be an honest human being to say, I for this association, for this person, for this, I stand for these things that they offer, but these things I do not. And
Yeah.
that is called individual thought process. We
Correct.
don't we lack more than ever a individual thought process because as we consume more knowledge, we feel that we're smarter, But really, we lack in such wisdom because wisdom would tell you to think for yourself, study for yourself, seek for yourself. But because we lack that, we lack individuality, we lack a belief system, we lack standards, we lack morals. So then we just have information. And so it's like technology and social media and this, the world is great, but we're more isolated, more mentally disturbed, and just more lonely than we've ever been. And so when someone comes and offers you something like the Bible, you find it to be almost insulting because everything else that you've experienced in this life has been flawed, has been
Mm,
disturbed, has been perverted. And so you assume that the Bible is that as well. But I think I read a statistic, the percentage of people who have actually read the Bible is so low that it's shameful.
yeah.
It's shameful to see the stances of discrediting it in comparison to the people who have actually read it.
Yeah, literally heard that song we was listening to earlier, Dusty Bibles. Literally, we got dust on our Bibles and brand new iPhones. Literally,
Mhm.
that's the world we live in today, where our
Yeah.
Bibles is sitting in the back of the dresser, back of the counter. Spider webs are on it, but we got a brand new box with a brand new iPhone on it, right? And we're
Yeah.
wondering why our minds are all twisted because you
Mhm.
sit on the phone scrolling all day, but you have no thought process of how to become a better understanding human being, how to interact with people. We live in a world now where, did you know that people are less and less and less and less able to speak in front of each other? Because
Mhm.
they don't want to talk on the phone. They don't want to talk to you in person because they're not used to it anymore. You got people who literally like cower down to try to talk to you in person, like they're like, because they're awkward because all they
They
do
come
is
with
this all day.
the
They just do this all day. They just sit on their phones and text all day, and they don't actually know how to interact with people because they don't understand what the Bible is telling us to do. This is the reason why Jesus says that relationships, loving each other is the most important thing, because when you stop doing that, you start reverting to yourself. And when you revert to yourself, you start putting yourself in this bubble to where you can no longer interact with the world. Only way you can interact with the world is by clicking a like button and clicking a tap button, so that way you can say boop boop boop, I just interacted with them, I like their post. We're
Mhm.
friends. This is not real. Just because you like someone's post doesn't mean you're our friends. Just because you follow someone doesn't mean you're our friends. This is a backward society. This is the reason why I say the Bible is the authority, and it has always stood the test of time, because the Bible has told us centuries ago that loving each other and talking to each other is what is going to keep us alive. It's what keep us thriving. Knowing that I have someone at home, knowing I have a brother down the road, knowing I have a sister that may need help building something, it keeps the world thriving. Do you know why we have infrastructure in houses and buildings that have been made? Because relationships. Men saw our wives need protection, our children need protection. Let's figure out how to make better houses. People saw how people need food, how people need this, people need that. Let's build stores, let's build Walmarts, let's build Amazons. Relationship between people, thinking about people, knowing what people need, connecting with people is what makes the world go round. Not sitting behind your iPhone and not understanding what's going on in this Bible. More people can quote what Cardi B said, or what Young Thug said in his interview, than what the Bible said in Genesis, or what the Bible said in the book of John or the book of Matthew. And that is terrible. So for us to not understand that how much authority the Bible has, do you know there's over 300 prophecies